Hello, my fellow Planeswalkers, and welcome back to the second episode of Johnny Among Spikes. Today, I'm going to be talking about Magic's newest format, Brawl, and a deck I've built for it. After that, in the combat step, we'll be talking about my second favorite guild, and how I believe their mechanic could have been different to make them just a little bit more flavorfully resonant. And finally, in the second main phase, I'll be discussing the first 5 questions from the original Great Designer Search and going over my answers for it. And this is to show how I wish to be a game designer for Magic the Gathering. But first, Advent Commander calls. Alright guys, first pick is Queen's Bay Soldier, then Fire Shrine Keeper, Pterodon Knight, New Horizons, One with the Wind, Headwater Sentries, Territorial Hammerskull, Dire Fleet Interloper, Swashbuckling, Siren's Ruse, Sleek Schooner, Makeshift Munitions, Bishop of the Bloodstained, Thematic Compass, and then a token card. Alright, so the card that jumps out at me immediately, beyond everything else, was the Thematic Compass. It just helps me find the lands that I need, and then is very useful in the end game to stop at least one person a turn from attacking you. Beyond that, the Fire Shrine Keeper is okay, the Territorial Hammerskull's okay, Siren's Ruse and Makeshift Munitions were the only other 2 cards that I really thought about taking, but I just think the Thematic Compass will be much better. So that's my pick, and on to main phase 1. Okay, so almost a year ago, Wizards of the Coast introduced a new rotating format to supplement their ever-growing popular format of Commander, and they call it Brawl. Essentially, Brawl is the fusion of Standard and Commander. The format involves building a deck with a leader to be available at any point in the game, like Commander, but in contrast to Commander, you can choose to play with either a legendary creature or a Planeswalker. Your deck can be constructed from only standard legal cards, and must be exactly 59 cards, and a legendary card to serve as your commander. I looked at this format as a way for standard players to take the leap into Commander by becoming proficient with and comfortable with cards they knew in Standard, and make a smaller Commander deck. And then once some of their cards began rotating out of their deck, they would have a decent 60-card base to expand into a full-fledged Commander deck, with a little bit less investment than a brand new 100 cards. But over the year, I've seen many Commander players like the idea of a rotating format that forces players to adapt and change their decks as new sets flow in and out of the format. Personally, I find the format a little constraining, but I do enjoy building decks for it and playing a couple of games here and there. And because of that, I wanted to take a crack at showing off a slightly altered Standard deck that I'm playing in Magic Arena that has become a Brawl deck. The general is the newly ascended Guildmaster of the Orzhov Syndicate, Kaya, Orzhov Usurper. In Standard right now, there is a fantastic number of ways to exile your opponent's cards from pretty much any zone of the game. The graveyard and the battlefield being the easiest, and with a great suite of sweepers, spot removal, and beefy endgame threats, this deck can take full advantage of a board state to put itself ahead while limiting its opponent's options. So, the first set of cards I want to talk about are the sweepers. We've got Settle the Wreckage, which will just straight up exile a ton of attacking creatures. Cry of the Carnarium will sweep all the early plays just straight into the exile zone, and both of these cards help with Kaya's game plan to exile as many of your opponent's cards as possible. There's also Kaya's Wrath, Cleansing Nova, and Ritual of Soot, which are just regular wraths, but they all have a little bit of a tweak to help them out, and just getting creatures into your opponent's graveyards can be useful so that Kaya's abilities actually do something. Her +1 ability actually does something. And then finally, there's Phyrexian Scriptures. Oh, I love Phyrexian Scriptures. It's a board wipe. It exiles graveyards. It does everything that this deck wants it to do, and as a benefit, you can also save one of your creatures from the board wipe effect. It is a fantastic card, and it is one of my favorite mythics currently in Standard. But moving on from the board wipes, you'll need a little bit of spot removal just to keep things flowing. And really, I tried to focus primarily on the removal that exiled your opponent's cards instead of those that just destroyed the creature. Now, the exception to that is Mortify. Mortify is really good right now. It either destroys a creature or an enchantment, and that kind of flexibility cannot be ignored. But Baffling End, Seal Away, Conclave Tribunal, and even Ixalan's Binding are all good ways to get rid of, in some cases, creatures, but in other cases, just get rid of a problematic permanent that's coming into play. So those are 4 of the best removal spells for that. Profane Procession lets you exile up to 3 creatures. More if you can get the mana and just limit it, but you'll get about 3 creatures every time. And then later in the game, when you get it to flip, it can cast those creatures for you. There's Vraska's Contempt, perfect spell to solve a problem creature or a planeswalker, which can be very difficult. Alright, and then there's the Dark Horse, Crush Contraband. Since you're playing in Standard, you don't get to play with cards like Turn to Dust, but this is as close to Turn to Dust as you're going to get, and it can be useful to either spot remove one thing, or if you have the option to remove both an artifact and an enchantment, just straight out. So I am very, very favorable on this card. So after that, you'll just want to have a good suite of creatures to keep the things going. Now, some of the creatures might be able to exile your opponent's cards like Trapjaw Tyrant, but beyond that, I'm just playing a bunch of big creatures to be good defenders and to put a lot of pressure on my opponent's life total with things such as Doom Whisperer, Spawn of Mayhem, or Torgar. And finally, I did want to play an Angel of Grace just because sometimes she'll get you out of that really tough situation and give you an extra turn that you might need. The basic game plan of this deck is to maintain control of the board while removing your opponent's cards from the game, from many different zones, not just in play. But there are a couple of cards that interact very well, such as Vona and the Saga Fall of the Thran, where you can basically set up a situation in which you destroy all the lands in play, then use Vona to get rid of the Fall of the Thran, and you have a Vona. But with that, I really like the controlling aspect of this deck. It has a way of ensuring that your life total maintains a high threshold, and it applies pressure from the get-go with your commander. So, today I was going to talk about the upcoming Magic story for War for the Spark, but since we're really close to the previews and story prep, I think that my speculation will be essentially lost among other YouTubers who specialize in the story. So instead, I'm going to discuss an ability that I would have thought the Orzhov Guild, my second favorite guild, would have had a more flavorful tie into their guild than the Afterlife ability. Now, don't get me wrong, the Afterlife ability works really well for the Orzhov, but I think an opportunity was missed by Wizards of the Coast here. So, in the previous 2 Ravnica blocks, the Orzhov have been typical bleeder decks, where their cards would never truly trade 2 for 1, but you get 1.5 or 1.25 advantage from every use of an Orzhov card. Afterlife can work into this style of deck, but really the ability feels more like something the Boros or the Selesnya would be more connected to, leading into a go-wide token strategy. The one thing that Ravnica is missing over other planes is an effective artifact guild. The closest guild being the Izzet, but generally they care more about instants and sorceries. I think this would have been a great spot for the Orzhov to occupy, moving into religious artifacts into their card slots and pushing a different type of token theme with either gold or treasure tokens. And even with that said, there was a standout enchantment from Ravnica Allegiance that deals with these tokens, Smothering Tithe. And it's not even really an Orzhov card. This card has been a standout in games I've played, eking out just that little bit of additional advantage that the Bleeder deck is trying to gain. So with that, I'd like to show off this week's amateur card design, Lady of the Church. I envisioned this card to be part of a 10-card cycle spanning all of the guilds and really capturing the essence of the guild's prominent themes. I imagined each lady of the guild would be a spirit, similar to the Cycle of Muses from Onslaught block. Each would have 2 abilities that would fit their colors, in this case being a black-white card gives the Lady of the Church flying and vigilance, and then some ability that relates to the guild mechanic. Since I see the Orzhov guild being a bleeder deck, I thought they would use a taxation system for when creatures try to attack you, and the opponent has to give you something, either 1 mana now, a card, or a stored mana that you can use in the future. The mechanic would be expanded upon with alternate and additional costs that would incorporate the sacrifice of a treasure token instead of straight mana, essentially allowing you to buy advantages in the game. But that's just my thoughts on how I think the Orzhov guild could have had a slightly more resonant mechanic. With that, let me move into the real reason I started my channel. I wanted to show Wizards of the Coast and others how much I love this game, and that I can channel that passion into a great energy that they can use to create new worlds and make new parts to go into their great machine. So today, I'll be beginning the process of explaining who I am and what I can bring to the table if given the opportunity to spread my unique thoughts by working through the 3 great designer searches. Now, this process will take longer than the amount of time I can devote to this one video, so today I'm going to answer the first 5 questions of the original Great Designer Search entry essay. So let's get into it. Well, I have a video introducing myself and explaining why I'm here today, and I'll provide the link in the description. But quickly, my name is Josh, and I've been playing Magic since 1994. I love games and gaming, and have a tendency to approach problems given to me in a unique way, trying to push the boundaries of restrictions I'm giving without outright breaking them. This is a difficult question, because invariably, Mana Screw is one of the worst parts of the game of Magic, with many different card games trying to tackle this issue in various ways, but none of them have quite reached the success that Magic has had. But with that said, Mana Screw can have some definite upside. First, it is an equalizer. It allows for a player of any skill to have an actual chance to win against any other player when the land density doesn't come out equally. Second, it forces players to become better deck builders and designers, making sure that they pay attention to the consistency of their deck's resources and threats, and adjust according to their observations. And finally, it can inspire creative ways to create decks and make plays within the game to ensure the correct threshold of lands are made, and then removing the excess afterward. Ooh, I know, Bandit! Oh, you said popular. Dang it. Okay, let's go with Transmute. Transmute is one of my favorite mechanics. It allows you to play situational cards that can be useful sometimes, but then you can turn them into something else if needed. For example, if you have a Muddle the Mixture, but your opponent is playing a creature-heavy deck, you could turn that useless counterspell into a kill spell for mana and time investment. Now, Magic's current development team has come down on tutors, reducing their numbers and power over the years. To combat this, but still keep Transmute as a usable mechanic, I think it could be changed to Transmute into X, where X would be some kind of card quality that further limits the answers you could find. So maybe a card like Muddle the Mixture would have Transmute into Sorcery. That way you can have an instant speed counter, but you can only turn it into a slower kill spell that costs the same. This question was asked at a time where Champions of Kamigawa block was not favored at all. Over time, people have kind of softened on it. There's definitely more fans of Kamigawa block now than there were when this first came out. But, in my opinion, there were a lot of great things about Kamigawa block. It was fun, it was Vorthos resonant, I enjoyed it, but out of everything, I love Splice onto Arcane, and I thought it was a great mechanic, if not a bit limited. I think if they took the concept of Splice onto Arcane and expanded it into Splice onto Sorcery, or Splice onto Instant, or something like that, this mechanic could be a source of great fun for people that want to just create unique effects and have a feeling of a real wizard crafting new spells on the fly. The problem, of course, would be balancing this and turning the knobs for each of the costs, but I think if done well and put enough time into, Splice could be a really great mechanic. Alright, I like Ravnica. I'm a little sour on it now because I'm bored of Ravnica, but Ravnica as a whole is fine. But I never really liked the split guild model of all three blocks. I think that all the guilds should have had a small number of cards in each set of the block, but not enough to devote an equal amount of card slots to each. For example, I would have liked to have seen a Dimir draft uncommon that would allow you to play a Dimir colored deck in Ravnica Allegiance. Now I'm not saying make 30 Dimir cards or devote a mechanic to them, but a common, uncommon, and a rare would be interesting to create some kind of bridge that makes an unlikely limited deck or some kind of special splash. And with that, I've taken on the first 5 questions from the original Great Designer Search, spoken about a mechanic that I think would work great for the Orzhov, and got to talk about a new Brawl deck that I think I will have fun playing around with. Thanks for joining me, everyone, and I hope to be able to continue putting on these episodes. If you'd like to help support me, please show me that you enjoy my shows, or if you have some constructive criticism, let me know and I'll continue to try and evolve my craft and skills. And don't forget that I'm still trying to finance an adventurous backpacking trip to Wizards of the Coast headquarters in Redmond, Washington, to seek a position within their company. So if you want to see a fat man walk the plains, support me over at GoFundMe. Thanks once again, and I'll see you all next time.